Recently, the Commander bracket system got updated, and my thoughts on those changes will be in this week's podcast. But at the end of the stream, Gavin talked about some proposed changes to Commander. One was hybrid mana. Currently in Commander, if you want to play Reese the Redeemed in the 99, your Commander deck has to have green and white in its color identity. The suggestion is to remove that restriction and make it an or rather than and. So Reese could go into a white deck, green deck, or be the commander for a green-white deck. They do clarify looking at the rest of the mana symbols on a card is normal, and use Deathrite Shaman as an example. So this could not be played in a mono-black deck, because it has a regular green mana symbol in the text box. And I believe that would mean that if they implemented this change, MDFCs that have lands on the back that tap for those specific colors would also not be allowed. They also said when it comes to two-brid mana costs, which is things like Beseech the Queen, their inclination would be to allow those to work in any deck, so it would functionally be colorless, but they specified that could be subject to change. My initial reaction was they probably shouldn't do this. I talked about it on the podcast, but I didn't seem to have a strong opinion. Now, after thinking about it for a while, I actually think this change is really bad for Commander and Magic as a whole. And I very, very much hope they don't change the hybrid mana rule. Initially, you might look at all these hybrid cards and say, why not? Most of these aren't good anyway, which is true. And actually, I want to give a quick shout out to Reddit user RB Goldbat here, who made a Moxfield list of all the cards that would be affected by this rule. So they have filtered out things like Deathrite Shaman, which would show up if you just searched for hybrid cards on Scryfall. Is it bad if Cultbrand Cinder showed up in a mono-red deck? I mean, not really. There are actually a lot of really cool things you can do with the hybrid mana change. For example, if you're playing a Boros Sunforger deck, you could now add Wheel of Sun and Moon. Wheel of Sun and Moon is great with Sunforger because when you cast your specific toolbox one of instant, it goes back into the deck and you can just cast it again later. I really like this interaction, but you have to play it in Naya colors specifically now. So if they change this rule, you could do it in Boros or Jeskai or whatever. There's a couple of other interesting things with Beseech the Queen specifically. Since it's two colorless or a black, yes, you could spend 6 generic mana on it, but it also means you could play Urborg in your deck and then just cast it for the triple black cost. Or if you have treasures, or you play Felwar Stone, there's a lot of other weird things you could add to your deck to fiddle around with the two-brid cards so you can actually get the discounted cost. Companions are another thing that could be very interesting for this. I want to shout out another Reddit user here, Animus Noctis, who made a little chart where you can see companions by color identity currently, and then if they change the hybrid mana rules, the amount of companions you could play in different colors suddenly jumps up a ton. Links to all of these Reddit posts in the description, by the way. This also leads to some jank combo lines sometimes. Like with Beseech the Queen, you now have a colorless tutor. So if you're playing a mono white deck that generates infinite mana and needs to search up a specific piece that it can't normally tutor easily, you could add this to your deck as part of your combo line. I understand all of that is actually pretty cool and would be very fun. And ultimately, if the rule changed tomorrow and they never printed another hybrid card again, I think Commander would be better off for it. But looking at what we have now and referencing a bunch of old cards made pre-Commanderification of Magic is not going to give you the whole picture. We need to think of the future. My issue would be the homogenization of what cards people play. We can already see this homogenization issue with some of the hybrid cards currently in existence. If Beseech the Queen becomes the go-to tutor for all the colors because they don't have access to black normally, then suddenly we're going to see a lot of this one card, and also a lot of Urborgs to then cast that one card. And then if you want to counter all of the Beseech the Queens, well, don't worry, there's an Ashiok Dreamrender, which you can then now play in a Jeskai list. With the cards that are color pie breaks, like Kiora Behemoth Beckoner, which has the ability, whenever a creature with power 4 or greater enters, under your control, draw a card, that is functionally a green effect that you could now play in any blue-red deck. So if you're playing a blue deck that plays big creatures like an Is It Dragons type thing, then you're going to really want this green effect. And it's the only green effect for that. So all of those decks will suddenly now also include this card. Waves of Aggression is another example of this. It is an extra combat effect in hybrid Boros, which means there's a lot of aggressive white decks that would want this card. But since it's the only effect like that, it means every single one of those decks only has one option to choose from. So this one singular card will suddenly be showing up in many, many, many decks. Manamorphose is probably the biggest example of this. It is functionally a free cantrip for any deck that has red or green, and it color fixes as well, meaning lots of 4 and 3 color decks that don't have red or don't have green will now suddenly want this card for the efficient color fixing. And what about new cards getting printed? When we look at some of the most popular cards in the format, a lot of them are mono-colored. And that's because, well, if it's mono green, it can show up in green and Simic and Teamer and 4-color and 5-color. There's so many places where it goes into. And there are a lot of really powerful cards designed for Commander that are staples, which show up in every single deck that has that color. Teferi's Protection, Jeska's Will, Smothering Tithe, these are all cards that were designed to be jammed in every deck that could possibly play them, and that is why they're so expensive. They're made to sell product. But this issue would get way worse if they were hybrid cards and then they got rid of the hybrid rule. Jeska's Will could be an Is It hybrid card, which means not only is it every single deck that has red in its color identity, but Mono Blue would want it, and Azorius would want it, and Sultai would want it. The demand for a hybrid staple would be way, way higher, which probably means much higher singles prices. And ultimately, isn't that in Wizards' best interest? Like, financially speaking, right? Yes, Smothering Tithe probably sold some packs, but if Smothering Tithe was Azorius color identity, and even more players really needed the card to power up their deck, then it probably would have sold a couple more packs, right? And I could totally see them doing this. The card Dam is a really powerful, useful card, and they could have made it all hybrid Orzhov, and then it would have shown up in mono white lists and mono black decks. And it would actually be even more than just mono white, mono black decks. If we look back at that chart, you can see that hybrid cards will show up in a lot more decks. I think this change would be the near death of 2-color cards in the game. I'm not saying they would completely remove it, but we would see a drastic decrease in the number of 2-color cards, and hybrid mana symbols would go crazy. You might be thinking, Con, that's crazy. They wouldn't just print Davin's Veto as 2 hybrid Azorius. Wouldn't that mess up other formats, because then any deck with white in it could have this uncounterable negate? But I mean, look at the game. It's all Commander cards. Commander has warped the entire design philosophy of the game. How many legendary creatures do we get every set? How many cards just feel like Commander cards? I'm not saying every card is currently made for EDH, but a lot of them are, even in standard sets. And with this rule change, I think we're just going to see hybrid mana symbols all over the place forever after that. I really feel like if this hybrid rule comes into effect, we will see a massive amount of hybrid cards get printed, and then a huge homogenization of what cards show up in Commander decks. If you think staple cards like Cyclonic Rift or Guardian Project already show up in too many Commander games, it would be way worse if they were hybrid cards. I really wish they would do the opposite for Commander. I want to see more triple white cards, or triple blue, or triple green, to make it more difficult to play the cards. So cards had to be used more carefully, or it would boost the power of monocolor decks that are already at a disadvantage. I feel like cards like Cyclonic Rift would not be as salt-inducing if it was many, many blue pips and could only really be played in mono blue. Having every card show up everywhere is just not interesting, and it's not a good idea for Commander. And before anyone says, oh, people play bad cards in Commander, blah, 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 a lot of these strong cards that I'm pointing out are relatively popular. And the only thing holding them back is honestly the price because they're so in demand. I also feel like a lot of people might think, oh, it's already over. We have EDH Rec and Made for Commander cards. Those are going to show up everywhere anyway. But that doesn't mean we need to make this change such that that problem becomes even worse, right? And additionally, it makes decks a lot more boring. So for Red, when they needed to make card draw cards, they invented, maybe not invented, but started using Impulse Draw a lot more as a red way to do card advantage. And now we have red card advantage engines that can be used so your red decks don't fall behind in Commander. But as soon as we start making hybrid is it regular card draw, all of these get thrown in the garbage. Because why would I impulse draw when I could just draw cards normally? White decks currently use mana rocks to ramp, but if they're creature oriented and not in green, a hybrid mana dork would mean they don't need mana rocks. They can just be green as well. Even if it's not a strict power level thing, like it's an individually super strong staple, the easier thing to do is what people will go with, and that will permeate through Commander really quickly. It sort of ruins the challenge or differences when you try to build decks in different color combinations. You won't have to use different cards. You'll just use the same ones for your other decks because, well, it's kind of easy to do. Now, of course, this is just my opinion, and if you have a different one, that is perfectly fine. I would love to hear it. This is a discussion topic. And if you want to hear more discussion about this, assuming everything goes right, I am releasing this video the same date and time as Tomer over on MTG Goldfish, and I will link to Tomer's video on hybrid mana in the description as well, so you can get another perspective on it. I really love all of the video essays Tomer has been putting out, so seriously, go give it a watch. It's worth checking out. Wizards, I feel like, is already kind of prepping for this change. Spider-Man had hybrid mana symbol cards, and Avatar will also have hybrid mana symbol cards, and Lorwyn will also have hybrid mana cards. And while I was editing this, I also realized that Tarkir had hybrid mana symbols too, and Ninja Turtles is going to have hybrid mana symbols as well. So it's like hybrid mana symbols all over the place already. I didn't even realize how much we're getting. So maybe it's too late already, I guess. I have no direct influence on this change. Yeah, I know I'm like a YouTuber or whatever, but I'm not like on the Commander format panel. WotC doesn't listen to me. I don't talk to WotC. This is just me sharing my thoughts and concerns about it. And so I'm really curious what you think. Please, in the comments below, tell me if you think that, hey, this is a terrible idea or this is a really good idea, and I'm completely off base. Anyway, thanks for watching. If you want to support me, check out my Patreon, and you can be in the credits like my tier 3 patrons are here. Plus, there's a bunch of other cool perks.